Yeah, always that thing comes up and drives you nuts. Okay, so tell me about Andrew Johnson.
Vice
Have a hand up.
President of Lincoln, I believe.
Okay, he's Vice President Lincoln, and what happens to him? He becomes president because what occurs? Lincoln is assassinated. Okay, so what then? Why was he chosen to be the vice presidential candidate of Lincoln? Okay. Well, he didn't secede.
He didn't leave.
He didn't leave when what seceded? When his state seceded. When his state seceded, he did not leave. Lincoln chooses him in 1864 as his vice presidential candidate as a kind of a welcome, like a hey, shout out to the South. Say, hey, when this war is over, we're going to be friends again. We're going to be buddies. We're going to be pals. Look, I'm making one of your own my vice president. Of course, Lincoln dies and he becomes president. Now, what was going on between the president and Congress when Lincoln died? What was occurring?
They were trying to figure out
There's a battle over what? What was it called?
Reconstruction.
Battle over Reconstruction, okay? Battle over Reconstruction. While Lincoln was alive, Congress couldn't do anything to oppose him and get away with it. Now Lincoln is dead, what occurs? Johnson is no Lincoln. As a result, Congress runs wild all over Johnson, and Johnson can't do much to stop him. Now, let us talk for a moment about the role of the Supreme Court. Because the Supreme Court is going to make two major decisions after the Civil War that are going to be kind of like the capstone to the Civil War legacy. The first is Ex parte Milligan, and this is in 1866. Before we get there, I need to talk about Salmon P. Chase. Justice Chase is the Supreme Court Chief Justice who presides over these cases. He's going to take the place of Roger Taney, who died in 1864. He had been the Secretary of the Treasury to Lincoln. He and Lincoln did not get along. He tried to resign several times. Lincoln wouldn't let him. Finally, in late 1864, the Treasury is in a very good place. It is not bringing money in, as we'll see as we get a little bit further, but it is very well ordered, and Lincoln doesn't need them anymore. So he allows him to resign, but then he appoints him to the Supreme Court Chief Justice. Now, as Chief Justice, he's going to be over these two cases. The first is Ex parte Milligan, and Ex parte means in regards to about Milligan, another case that they have. And in this case, what was happening was a complaint. See, when martial law is in effect, or was in effect in the South, if you committed a crime, if you did something that was against the law, you were arrested and then taken before a military tribunal to be tried. Okay? What is different from a military tribunal than a United States court, our United States court system? What is the major difference? Anybody in the military? Been in the military? Nope. Nobody knows the answer, okay? In a military tribunal, you are tried by higher officers. There's no impartial jury. And if you are convicted, you cannot appeal it. Okay? If you are in the military, you commit a crime, you go before a military tribunal, you are found guilty, the sentence is carried out. There are no appeals. All right? So what happens is during Reconstruction and martial law was going on in all of the South here, that the courts were not being used. The state judicial system was not being used. Somebody committed a crime, they went before a military tribunal and they were found innocent or guilty, and then the sentence was carried out. a group of people took issue to this and sued. It gets to the Supreme Court, and in this case, the Supreme Court sides with the people who are bringing the charges. Because, see, at the time that the military tribunals were meeting in the South, the civilian court system was open. It wasn't like it was closed down. They just chose not to send them to the civilian courts because it was quicker. All right? Don't have that whole appellate process to worry about. All right? If you're found guilty in a court of law today, what immediately happens? You appeal it to the Court of Appeals. You're found guilty there, what happens? You appeal it. Depending in Texas, depending on what it is, if it's a civil issue, it goes to the Texas Supreme Court. If it is a criminal issue, it goes to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. Just depends on what the issue is. Okay? In military tribunals, you're found guilty, you're taken outside, and you're shot. So in this case, the Supreme Court sides with those bringing the charges, bringing the complaint, saying that our rights are being violated because the civilian courts are open, but they're not sending them to us due to they just want it to be quicker. They want to be over quicker. The federal government wants it to be over quicker. Supreme Court slaps the federal government across the face and says, no, you can't do this. You're violating these civilians' rights. They are not military. They're not military officers. They're not enlisted men. They have to be tried in civilian courts when those courts are indeed open. Right now, if for some reason they weren't open, then it would be a different subject. But they are. It's not like they're closed down. So that's ex parte Milligan. This still comes up today. People argue that the, I can't remember his name, the 9/11 mastermind, Sheikh, I can't remember, Abin or whatever, should be tried in civilian court. President Obama came out, I think it was the summer, and said, we're going to try him in a civilian court in New York. Well, it's going to take 2 years for this entire court to go through just the process of that, and then you're going to have to pay for extreme amounts of security because it would be every terrorist's dream to kill this guy, make him a martyr, because more people would want to follow along to the reward supposedly he has in the afterlife. As a result, people in New York freaked out about this because they don't want somebody coming and blowing up a bomb in New York. You know, they've kind of been through that recently. And as a result, President Obama backed off of that statement. But what he's trying to do is trying to use civilian courts instead of military courts. Of course, there's a whole other issue there as well of extending full constitutional rights to somebody who's not a United States citizen. And that's still divided amongst the talking heads. All right, that's the first case. The second one, Texas versus White, 1869. So, tell me, Texas is known for 3 things that it can do that no other state can. Who can tell me one of them? We will secede. That's right, okay. What's another one? We can be split into 5 separate states. Of course, why would you want to? Texas is the coolest looking state in the world anyway. And then you'd look like, Colorado.
Hi, I'm a rectangle.
Right. Okay. That fills you with pride. What's the third one? Has to do with the flag.
We can fly our flag as high as...
We can fly our flag as high as Old Glory. Okay? Only one of those is actually correct. Which one is it? We can divide ourselves up into 5 different states. We can't fly the flag at the same height, but we still do. Why? Because we're Texans. And second, because of Texas versus White, we cannot secede. Now, let's look at this. In Texas versus White, the state of Texas takes issue with the United States government bringing us back into the Union. See, the Articles of Annexation had said Texas can leave the Union anytime they want to. We joined the Union as a separate nation, Therefore, we reserve the right to leave the nation if we so chose. Therefore, of all the other states that seceded during the Civil War, Texas makes the claim that you said it's illegal. We have a document that says it isn't. It says that we can. Okay? Now, as a result, the Supreme Court in this decision is going to embrace Abraham Lincoln's theory of the nation. Now, according to the South, in 1789, the original 13 states ratified the Constitution of the United States, in which we stated that that we entered freely of our own choosing. No one was forced to enter the Union, correct? Right? No, they all ratified it. If you didn't ratify it, you weren't in it. But everybody did ratify it. You chose to join. Now, who remembers the whole issue from 1301, or maybe kind of federal government, about delegated, denied, and reserved powers? Do I remember those? In the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 through 17, says Congress can only, don't write this down, Congress can only do those things that are specifically mentioned here. Okay? So they're specifically delegated. All right? They're not delegated. Then you have Article 1, Section 10, which denies to the states, the denied powers, what the states can't do. They can't create an army. They can't levy taxes. They can't print their own money. Things of that nature. All right. And then we have the 10th Amendment, which is the states' rights doctrine, which says anything that is not delegated to the federal government nor denied to the states is what? Reserved to the states. So, in the Constitution, where does it say anything about secession? The answer is nowhere. Therefore, since it's not specifically mentioned, nor is it specifically denied, the 10th Amendment, Texas claims, kicks in and what? And the South claims this too. It is reserved for the states. Of course, we had this little thing called the Civil War about the states' right to secede. And who won? The party the group that said what? You can't. As a result, you can't. Now, Lincoln's belief, when he encountered this whole issue about the Constitution saying it's not delegated nor applied, delegated nor denied, so therefore it's reserved, says, yes, that may be in the Constitution, but our nation transcends the Constitution. Our nation transcends the Constitution to July 4th, 1776, in the Declaration of Independence. As a result, our nation was created on that day for a higher purpose than the Constitution. Okay? So what he's saying is, there's a net theory. His theory is that the nation began in 1776, not 1789 when the Constitution was ratified. Okay? As a result, since the war was won by the Yankees, Lincoln's theory wins out. And in Texas versus White, 1869, the Supreme Court makes a Supreme Court decision that states cannot secede. Okay? States cannot secede. Even though Texas, which had the right, cannot secede. You don't have the power. You have to go walk around. Come back. Get your blood flowing. All right, so why do you know Johnson? You probably know Johnson before I even mentioned him. Probably because he is one of two presidents to be impeached. Now, what is the phrase, what does the statement impeach mean? If I impeach your character, I'm bringing charges against you. Have they been proven? No, there's just evidence of that. Okay? If I were to see you walking into Hurricane Harry's on Thursday night, and then on Friday I saw you and said, "Oh, you were drinking as a minor at Harry's last night, weren't you?" Okay? Did I actually see it? Has it been proven? No, but there's enough evidence to say you went into a bar, you were there, and I'm bringing charges against you. I'm saying, yeah, you did. Okay? Now, if you are, before you go to a trial in our justice system, what must you have? What must be leveled against you? A charge of, starts with an I. Charge of indictment. A grand jury will look at the evidence and decide whether or not there's enough evidence to proceed to trial. It's an indictment, because we don't want to go to trial if you only get one without having enough evidence to convict you. Okay? So what an indictment is bringing charges against you. There's enough evidence to proceed further. Same thing with an impeachment. Okay? We've had 2 presidents impeached. Who are they? Johnson and who?
Clinton.
And Clinton. Nobody says Nixon anymore. No, Nixon was never impeached. They had him dead to rights. Articles of impeachment were introduced in the House, but there's a difference between being introduced and being voted on. The charge of impeachment have been introduced against Clinton, against Bush, against Obama. They're introduced all the time. Okay? But there's a difference between being introduced and being voted and passing the House of Representatives. So, how many have been impeached? 2. Clinton for the Monica Lewinsky scandal, and Johnson. Now, why is Johnson going to be impeached? Well, he fires his Secretary of War, Edward Stanton. Now, what does that have to do with anything? Well, if we go back to a couple of slides that we talked about last time, and we look at the Radicals program, they put traps, or they laid legislative traps to catch Johnson, try to get rid of him. Remember, this guy has the record for for quickest vetoes overridden. Within 30 minutes of a bill being vetoed by the President, Congress had gotten a 2/3 vote to override it, and the House and the Senate. Okay? Boom, 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 like that. 30 minutes. So what they did is, remember, they set this trap for him. The Congressional Sessions Act took out his power to pocket veto things. Remember, Lincoln pocket vetoed the Wade Davis bill. The Command of the Army Act of 1867 made general grants independent of the President, even though the President is called by the Constitution and given the authority by the Constitution as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. They took that right away. Now somebody can say, well, why didn't anybody sue? That's unconstitutional. Nobody sues. Supreme Court can't hear it. And then the third one is the Tenure of Office Act of 1867, which said the President can't fire people that he has appointed. All right? Now, let's go back to where we are. The President Johnson, fires his Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton. Wasn't doing what he wanted him to do, so he says, you're fired. Now, historically, is the President within his rights to fire a member of his cabinet? Absolutely. He has that authority. Why? Because that is something that has been given him since Washington's time. You serve at the leisure of the President. Once that's, you no longer have the President's full confidence, you are fired. Okay? Now, because he fires him, Congress says, aha, we have you now, you have violated the Tenure of Office Act. We are introducing articles of impeachment. It goes into the House, they pass with 51%, it goes to the Senate, and he goes to trial. There, Johnson, while he is being tried by the Senate, has a vote that falls short of removing him from office. The second part of the whole impeachment and removal process falls short of the removal by 3 votes. Okay? By 3 votes. This occurs in 1868. Wow, 3 votes. You'd think if you go all this process, you'd have all your ducks in a row. Now, why do those 3 people not vote to remove him? Well, it's 1868. When was Lincoln elected? He's serving out Lincoln's term. When was Lincoln elected? He's elected in 64. How long does the President serve? 4 years. It's 1868. What happens if the president vetoes a bill? Now, what does the president do? Let's do that. He signs bills. It's a law. What happens if he doesn't sign a bill? He vetoes it. Remember, he can't pocket veto it. He has to sign it. If he vetoes it, the other option, what occurs? Congress overrides it over his signature anyway. He's not really much more than a figurehead at this point. The 1868 election is coming up, and everybody knows he's not going to be reelected, so why bother? How many guys have ever seen a chicken with his head cut off? Somebody cut a chicken's head off, what happens to the body? Runs around. All over creation. Doesn't make any noise. You know, I always make that mistake. It makes a noise when the chicken's head's cut off because he doesn't have a mouth anymore. Because, you know, his head's cut off. It's laying there on the ground. And the chicken's running around. Okay. Blood spurting everywhere. Okay. Doesn't bother you now? So what happens is that's kind of like what would happen if you impeached and removed the President of the United States. The government would be without a head. And it'd cause more turmoil to remove him than to just let him, just let it ride a couple more days and be done with it. So, as I said, 68 election is underway. The Republicans aren't going to nominate him. The Democrats sure aren't going to nominate him. And as a result, we're almost done with them anyway, so who cares? Well, the 1868 election, as I said, is well underway. The Republicans are entering their greatest era of control of the White House. Between 1861 and 1921, a period of 60 years. 60 years, let's see, divide that by 4, that's 15. There are going to be 15 presidential elections. During those 15 presidential elections, those 60 years, Democrats are going to win the presidency only 4 times. 16 years of those 60 are going to be won by Democrats. Okay? They're going to be entering into their greatest era of control. Well, in 1868, Congress kind of likes being run by itself and running the government. They don't want a strong candidate who might oppose their policies. So they decide they're going to choose somebody who will be easily controlled because he doesn't really know anything about the way government works. Okay? So they choose the Lieutenant General, the highest ranking general in the United States Army. He won the Civil War, Ulysses S. Grant. The Democrats are going to nominate Governor Horatio Seymour. Seymour is the governor of New York. In this election, as you can see, Grant wins. Now notice, Texas, Alabama, and Virginia are still undergoing Reconstruction. They have not met the necessary requirements to have Reconstruction ended. If you take Texas history, you will see that Texas goes through a humongously long, very difficult, but very corrupt Reconstruction. It's not going to be until 1876 that Reconstruction ends in Texas. We're just 1868, 3 years after the election was over. Kentucky, Louisiana, and Georgia are going to vote Democrat, but the rest is Republican. The reason for this is for these other states here, is that when Reconstruction ended, a lot of these states enacted laws that prevented Democrats from voting. And as a result, it diluted the Democrat vote in the states, and they went for a Republican. Grant wins this election. So let's look at Grant as president. Grant's administration can best be defined as an abject failure. He was exactly what congressional Republicans wanted, somebody easily controlled, because he did not know really what he was doing. Grant grew up very poor, and like many people who grew up very poor, when they have greatness thrust upon them, and maybe not with it monetary wealth, they have a tendency to be in awe of people who have actual power, actual wealth, and are easily swayed in that regard. He's a very poor judge of character. He would choose people who flattered him for important positions. This is the era of the spoil system, where everybody who is in the bureaucracy is kicked out once one president leaves office, so that the new president can appoint his hand-chosen people who supported him in the election, to positions of authority. The statement "not qualified for office" might be a little harsh, because the Constitution says you must be a United States citizen, you must have residency in the United States for 14 years prior to the election, and you must be at least 35 years of age. Grant had all those. However, the definition of qualification here is that he had been in the military almost all his life. He left the military after the Mexican-American War and had started a business. His business failed. He would lose his wife and his, I want to say, son due to alcoholism. When I say lose, becomes estranged, not like kills him or anything. But after the war is over, he reunites with her because his wife, because he kicks the bottle. Kicks the bottle. The main problem he had is that he, by being in the military, he was accustomed to how the military works, not like how the political system works. Okay? So, let's say I am a commanding officer. I am a general. Patrick, let's say you are a captain. I give you a direct order. You don't do it. What happens?
I get fired.
Well, you don't get fired.
Well, fired.
You get fired at, yes.
Yeah.
If the general is especially vicious, Andrew Jackson, you can execute that person on the spot for failure to obey a direct order. The best thing that can happen to you is that you will have a military, you will have a court-martial. Okay? All right? So Patrick's dead. That's how politics works. Wow. We wouldn't have anybody run for office anymore. In the political system, Taylor, let's say you are a member of, I'm the president, you are a member of the government, and you do not agree with something that I'm telling you to do. Okay? All right? What are your options? What if you don't do it? What if you choose not to do it? What happens? The worst thing that could happen is you would lose your job. Okay? The worst thing that could happen is that you would lose your job. Okay? So you could, if you don't like that, crumple that photo over your shoulder, never see that bill again. The problem is Grant never adjusted to that. He never understood that when he said go forth and do, they didn't have to. There is nothing requiring them to actually do that. And this would cause quite a bit of problems. Now, one of the major things that is starting to come up in the 1868, 1870s is a need for civil service reform. Okay? Today, if you apply for a government job, the first thing that they do is they give you a test. They give you the civil service exam. And the civil service exam is kind of like an aptitude test. Did you guys do aptitude tests in high school to figure out what you're good at? I was supposed to be a radio DJ. Like, why would I want to be a DJ? I've got a friend who's a DJ, and she does like 5 minutes of work every day. She took us to like the radio station, and she just gets in there and says, records 6 hours has 6 hours of songs set up, and she just does a little, 5-second intro, and she's done for the day. Like, yeah, I wouldn't want to do that. But it's kind of like this aptitude test. Okay, hey, you are good in these categories. What offices do we have? What jobs do we have available in these categories? And then you would be offered one of those jobs that you're best suited for. Okay? The problem is that didn't exist at this time. That's what people wanted. They wanted civil service reform. We're not going to get it under the Grant administration because Grant believe that Congress, rightfully so, is the branch of government that listens directly to the people. Yes? Right? When you go to vote, who are the people that you vote for directly in our federal government? I'll give you a hint. It's not the president. You do not vote directly for the president, ever.
Congressman?
You vote for your representatives, and you vote for your senators. Thanks to the 17th Amendment, you vote for your senators. Not back then, you did not. Back then, senators were chosen by your state governments. But you chose your representatives, and you spoke to your representatives, and you wrote your representatives. So Grant's belief here is that since Congress wasn't sending anything forward in regard for him to sign in regards to civil service reform, obviously the people didn't want it. What he didn't realize is that those people, those representatives in Congress were like, wait a minute, if we reform civil service, we'll lose one of our most important powers, and that is the power of patronage. Okay? Putting people in places that benefit them to thank them for supporting you, giving you money, working on your campaign, what have you. Okay? They didn't want to do that. Now, because of his actions, because of his hands-off nature, because of prolonged Reconstruction taking way too long, there's going to be a split in the Republican parties. Remember, the Democrat Party is not much of a factor at this time period. The Democrats are not really participating much, shall we say, in the grand scheme of things with how the national political party runs. And that's just because they have been disenfranchised so much in the South. And as a result, when there is not competition from without, you will have competition from within. Therefore, the Republicans, who do not like what is going on with this Grant's attitude, Grant's hands-off nature, Grant's desire to reign more than rule. What's the difference between reigning and ruling? When you reign, you're like, hey, I'm the president, look at me, I'm great, I'm wonderful. Versus rule, okay, what's going on? How can I fix things? What do I need to address in my administration to fix it? The liberal Republicans in 1872 are going to come out and call this Grantism. Okay, they're going to come out and call this Grantism. They don't like these things. Everything we do not like about the current administration, when Grant is running for a second term, we're going to call Grantism. Okay? The fact that he hasn't ended Reconstruction, it's been 7 years since the war is over. Why is Reconstruction still going on? He's not interested in reform. And third, we're just going to touch on it very quickly here because we're going to spend a substantial amount of time with Lecture 2 and onwards, is this concept of high tariffs. See, in 1872, the federal government was a marijuana user. Okay, what's the problem with marijuana? It's the gateway drug, right? Start marijuana. If you use marijuana, you're more likely to use something else. Okay, marijuana, the equivalent of marijuana to the federal government, is tariffs. Okay, what is the government addicted to? Okay, what is it today? $15 trillion. Debt. Money. $15 trillion our federal government is in debt today. After the Civil War, there is an absurd amount of debt that the federal government has to pay. Why? They just finished fighting a war. Wars are expensive. Now, back then, the 16th Amendment to the Constitution had not been ratified. The 16th Amendment says the government can tax your income, how much money you make. A giant, and you walk down the street sometime and you walk by people and you hear this whooshing sound coming as they go past you. You think that's the wind going by because you're moving so quick. No, that's the federal government sucking the money out of their wallets in their back pocket. Okay? Income tax did not exist at that time period. The way the government got its fix was through tariffs. The way they paid for everything was through tariffs. And during Grant's administration, Congress decided, hey, we got this huge debt. We have to start taking care of it, and therefore we are going to raise tariff rates. Now, what is a tariff?
Import tax.
Tax on what? Things imported. It's a tax on things imported that perhaps we make in the United States as well. Okay? And so this is done ostensibly to protect manufacturing. However, what happens is Congress likes to raise it pretty high to kind of help out people who, contribute to their campaigns. All right, this is the way they make money. During Grant's first administration, they raised the tariff to 48%. Okay, so taxes were paid on things that were imported at 48%. What does that mean? If you were importing something that was $100, how much would it now be thanks to this tariff? $148. Okay. Now, why would they do something like this? Well, to make money, the only way they could make money, and to also help out further manufacturing. Do we still do this today? Yeah. How many guys own a foreign car? Okay. How many guys own a foreign car? Why do you own a foreign car instead of a domestic car? Because it's better. All right. There's this belief that it's better. 9 times out of 10, it's true historically. Okay. But usually these cars are more expensive. Why?
It costs money to bring them in.
Okay, it costs money to bring them in here. Okay. What else? Because you have a tariff on them from the federal government because the federal government wants you to buy GM, wants you to buy Ford, and wants you to buy Chrysler. Okay? Over these foreign cars because that money here stays here locally. Therefore, there is a high tariff on these items. Follow? How many guys have ever seen or ever heard of a Jimmy or a Bronco? Okay. All right. Okay. When I was in high school and I wanted the car I wanted, I see it now on the road and it looks like a big old piece of junk, was a two-door Pathfinder. Okay. Two-door Nissan Pathfinder because they had a really cool. I'm going to show this to you guys. Yeah, that's just really tacky. It had these really cool windows. Like they had a small window right here, and it had another window on the back like that. It was really cool that way. All right, that's how it was cool. But see, the government, because there's so many of these coming in, the Nissan Pathfinders, the RAV4s, Toyota RAV4s, that it was killing off the two-door Explorers. It killed off the Jimmys. It killed off the Broncos. And I think there's something else. The Jimmy, there's another type of car like that. And it killed them completely off. S10 Blazer, there you go. Killed all those off. So what they did is they passed a tariff that made these about $5,000 to $10,000 more expensive than their domestically created counterparts. So you couldn't get a two-door version of this. You could get a four-door version of this that didn't have the cool windows. So, I couldn't buy it. You buy a car because we like the windows. I was 16, what can you say? So anyhow, that still happens today. That still happens today. The building, the student center, was delayed here. Our campus was delayed like a year and a half because of a tariff placed on steel. Because the steel was coming in cheaper from overseas than it cost to produce it domestically. For whatever reason. I'm not going to go into the reasons because I know what they are. I'm not going to discuss them. And as a result, construction lagged behind for like a year and a half. Okay, so that's high tariff. They wanted to pay off their debts. They had to pay off their debts because they were substantially in the hole. So what happens is these people who are upset with Grant are going to create a, shall we say, third party. They're going to nominate the editor of the New York Tribune, Horace Greeley, to be president of, and they're going to run him as a third-party candidate. The radicals, still in control of Congress, are going to renominate Grant. They like it. He does whatever they say. They get away with everything. Now, because the Democrats really don't have anybody they can run on, they say, hey, we could get into office if we adopt these liberals' version of who their candidate is. So they nominate Greeley as well. Now, in the actual election, Greeley chooses to be a poor choice. He's an editor of a newspaper that was very, very critical to the South during the Civil War. He was very critical to the culture of the South during the Civil War. And he had a very kind of comical appearance. You look him up on Google Images. He kind of looks like a retarded Ben Franklin. Okay, like, ooh, with the ponytail. And so he just doesn't, little glasses and everything, doesn't look presidential. So Grant wins that re-election. Now, it's not long after Grant is re-elected that a whole series of scandals erupt that go straight back to his administration. See, the problem with being so hands-off, the presidency, is that when left unchecked, people are going to take advantage to abuse their offices. Don't believe me? Look at this example. Benjamin Barstow. He was the Secretary of the Treasury to Grant. In 1875, it was discovered that while he was serving as Secretary of the Treasury, he had been involved, and he had been the ringleader of a giant conspiracy that skimmed off millions and millions of dollars from taxes collected from whiskey being distilled. He and his Treasury agents who collected the taxes took a slight cut of the money before they dropped it off and became exceptionally wealthy. Now, this was headquartered in a place called St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis, Missouri, perhaps you've heard of. They have a group of people who like to play the greatest game God ever created, known as baseball. They're not going to be that great anymore because they got rid of the machine. Albert Pujols no longer plays for the Cardinals, but when he did play for the Cardinals, the St. Louis Cardinals, he played at what stadium? Busch Stadium. Now, why is it called Busch Stadium? B-U-S-C-H. Okay, Busch Beer, Busch Distilleries. They make what? Budweiser. They make, and they make a lot of beer. They do today. They made a lot back then, and this is where the whiskey ring started out. It was the headquarters of the whiskey ring. Now, Barstow is going to be charged and convicted and sentenced to jail. So are a lot of his conspirators. And he is actually and the government is actually going to recoup about $3 million of this stolen money. Now, what was Grant's role in this? The answer is it's inconclusive. We don't know. It's kind of like Ronald Reagan's role in the Iran-Contra scandal. What was worse, the fact that this was going on and he didn't know about it, or that he knew about it and violated the law? It's like, darned if you do, darned if you don't, both sides. But Grant was never successfully tied to it, and as a result was able to escape any prosecution. Now let's turn our attention for a moment to foreign affairs, because see, foreign affairs are going to dominate our time in 1302, because so much of history 1302 involves the United States as a member of the world community. During the Civil War, Mexico, let's rephrase, somebody's like, wait a minute, I remember Mexico being involved in the Civil War. During the Civil War, or while the Civil War was occurring, Mexico secured a humongous loan from France. France, during the Civil War, said, hey, why aren't you making your payments? Mexico says, don't have the money. Can't do it. France says, pay us up. Pay up. Mexico says, can't do it. What you going to do? France says, we'll show you what we're going to do. And France, led by Napoleon Bonaparte III, the great-nephew to Napoleon Bonaparte, the former emperor of France and most of Europe during the French Revolution, is going to take over Mexico, overthrow the Mexican government, and install Maximilian of Austria as the emperor of Mexico. How's that for you? What you going to do? Well, boom, there you go. Now, during the Civil War, we were kind of preoccupied, so this kind of passes not unnoticed, but when you're fighting one guy, you see this other guy making some moves way behind you. You're going to try to knock this guy out before you go after him, right? That's usually how it goes. So, after the Civil War, and our house is in order, we started looking around to see what else has changed during this time period, and we noticed that Mexico is now a French colony. Whoa, how'd that happen? And we remember about this little thing that we passed in 1823 called the Monroe Doctrine. And the Monroe Doctrine specifically stated that from that point on, the United States would not allow colonization in what was known as the New World. Anything in the Western Hemisphere was off limits to European colonization. Couldn't do it. We would not allow it, and we would go to war to prevent that from happening. Okay? Now, why would we issue a statement such as that? That sounds kind of, aggressive. That's kind of like us overstepping our bounds. Well, you have to understand what had happened. Now, prior to this in 1823, France had been defeated by the Quadruple Alliance made up of Spain, England, Austria, and Prussia. They had been defeated. The French Revolution was crushed, Napoleon was dethroned, and I would say that's Louis the 16th, 17th, something like that, was placed on the throne. The monarchy was returned. Now, you had this huge army that had defeated the largest military on the face of the earth, largest military ever to walk the face of the earth. And they were all sitting around, they're like, hey, that was fun, what are we going to do now? And see, during the time of 1789 to 1820, 1815, when you had the French Revolution consuming Europe, things that had used to be important to Europe, European countries, no longer was. Kind of like Spain's dominion in Mexico. When Spain is fighting for its life at home, it could care less about what's going on in Mexico. And in 1811, Mexico rebelled and secured their freedom in 1821. So now, 1823, Quadruple Alliance, now the Quintuple Alliance, I should say, because France joined with them, so now you have an even bigger army. Look around and say, hey, what can we do? We need to get our colonies back. We need to get our colonies back. Spain goes, ooh, let's go to Mexico. Okay? And that freaks the United States out. Why? Because in 1823, Texas wasn't part of the Union. There was a couple people in Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, but there was nothing out here. Yet the world's largest military came down to Mexico, took over Mexico, and then just said, and England said, or somebody said, hey, you know what? There's some former colonies up there in the north that used to be European colonies. Let's just go up there. Anybody going to stop them? No, absolutely not. But see, at the same time, a member of the Quintuple Alliance wasn't very excited about going places and restoring colonies. They didn't like this idea. So England mentions to the United States that you guys need to pass something or declare that you're not going to put up with colonization. You're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to do it anymore. And so the President of the United States, James Monroe, passes or issues the Monroe Doctrine that says you are not going to do this ever again. You stay over in Europe, and the United States will stay over, we'll take care of the issues over here at the New World. So what happens basically, is the United States in a little bitty, one cannon ship is, flying a flag, here's the United States, saying, you're not going to do this. We will not allow you to do this. The problem is, at that time period, we do not have the military to back it up. Okay? If they came over here and just completely landed, the United States would cease to exist. There's no way we could stand against anything that they would do. The problem, or the benefit here, is that as soon as we issued the Monroe Doctrine, England started clapping. Yeah, that's a great idea. We like that. That's wonderful. That's fantastic. That is absurdly awesome. The level of awesomeness there is great. So what happens is, since they draw onto it, they're the giant navy that helps us enforce the Monroe Doctrine for the first couple of years. Because, I mean, those big old freaking ships. 100 cannons, 50 each side. You don't want to mess with them. There's a reason Rule Britannia, Rule the Waves is the first stanza to England's national anthem, because the British Navy was the largest navy in the world during this time period. So when they join on with us, we're the little ship, they're towing us along, but they're joining on with protecting us. Saying, yeah, we agree. So what happens is, with the Monroe Doctrine, when it was introduced, we couldn't enforce it. Okay, now that's important. Why? Because what happens now is, because Maximilian is in Mexico, because Napoleon III had put him in there, that is against the Monroe Doctrine. And since it is against the Monroe Doctrine, the United States cannot allow it to stand. Therefore, our Secretary of State under Johnson, William H. Seward, goes down, or actually goes over to France to meet with Napoleon. And he goes over there and he says, listen, you are in violation of the Monroe Doctrine. We are not going to let you set up a puppet government and colonize Mexico. It will not stand. Now, Napoleon realizes that he's got a problem. As you'll see in a minute, he is preparing, or going to try, he's preparing to regain his great uncle's empire, which, if you'll remember, was all the way to Portugal and all the way to Russia. Didn't include Russia because he couldn't take it. But he pretty much controlled all of Europe. He's going to try the same thing. And while he's trying to do this, he does not want to fight a two-front war. And when Seward tells him that there are 10,000 battle-trained, battle-hardened Union soldiers in Texas that could be in Mexico City in 1 month, Napoleon says, fine, we're out. He leaves Maximilian high and dry. And what do the Mexicans in Mexico do? It's not very long before Maximilian is pulled off his throne, thrown down into the streets, and stoned to death. Because Napoleon just completely left him there. Left him out to hang out to dry. Now, in addition, Seward is going to do something that is probably not the biggest land deal, but it's one of the biggest land deals in the history of the United States, and that is the purchase of Alaska. Seward is going to purchase Alaska from Russia, who didn't want it anymore. It's a whole bunch of Eskimos, caribous, and frozen stuff, and purchases it for $7.2 million. Now, just so you know, I don't ask this type of question on the test. That breaks down to 586,412 square miles. 586,412 square miles that was purchased for $7.2 million. Now, who's really good at math? 2 cents an acre. 2 cents an acre. Now, Russia's going to kick themselves about 15 years later. Why? Not oil yet. Oil is going to be a major resource, but not really until they know it's there. The problem is refining it and getting it shipped somewhere else where we could actually use it. But what they do discover beforehand is gold and silver. And one of the big turn-of-the-century issues, one of the big turn-of-the-century gold finds is in Alaska. Humongous gold rush. All right. Okay, Armando, here's the deal. I want you to grow your sideburns out like this the rest of the semester. I think the girls would really go for it, and you wouldn't have that problem we had last semester with none of the girls talking to you in class. I think that'll be good. Okay? So watch out. You gotta have a bring a little comb to keep them, all nice, luxurious, next to the conditioner. Okay. This is Hamilton Fish. He is the Secretary of State to Grant. Now, his claim to fame is during Grant's administration, the United States was almost to a point of war with England. Now, the United States has not been to war, and I'm talking 2012 dates, has not been to war with England since the War of 1812 ended. But we come close here. You see, during the Civil War, England, although they would have liked to recognize the South's right to exist in the Confederacy, did not, because to do so would be to prove themselves hypocritical. See, England had abolished slavery in their colonies and at home back in the 18-teens. To recognize now a slave institution, a slave nation, would be 180 degrees opposite of how they had set themselves up as a nation. Now, while they could not do that, they had no problem with perhaps supplying some munitions and weaponry to the Confederate States of America. One of these weapons that is provided is a commerce raider known as the CSS Alabama, the Confederate State Ship Alabama. Did quite a bit of damage to Union shipping during the war, and after the war was over, the United States pressed England on why they gave it to them. Because you're going to tell us why you gave it to them, and you're going to pay one way or the other. Now, because Fish is our Secretary of State, he gets England to agree to arbitration. What is arbitration? It's a settlement from a third party. When you have an international arbitration, another group comes in to be an independent decider. If you are in a fight and your buddy is in a fight and you can't figure out, I don't know, you bring a third person in, here's both sides, makes a decision, and whatever that decision is, before they make the decision, you agree that you will abide by it. All right? So that is the arbitration. Because England commits to this arbitration, the United States does as well, we avoid war. And since we avoid war here, it reflects very highly on Fish, but at the same time, the United States gets a $15 million payment from England to take care of these claims of the loss of shipping that occurred during the time. Of course, thanks to the Alabama. All right. Okay. So, let's jump back to 1301. History 1301. Jason, tell me what side Germany was on in the American Revolution.
The American Revolution?
Yes, what side was Germany on?
Germany was on the side of the Americans, I believe.
Brent? Anybody else want to take a stab at it? Coda? No? It's a trick question. Germany did not exist. Germany did not exist at this time period. Germany is not going to be created until after 1871. See, when Napoleon III pulled out of Mexico, pulled his support out of Mexico, he did so knowing that he was about to attack the attack on the eastern front of France. There was 32 Germanic principalities that had existed from time immemorial. You had Austria, you had Hungary, you had Hesse, you had all sorts of crazy places down there. They were all separate. Germany as a whole is not going to be created until after this, or as a nation is not going to be created until after this time period. the way I asked my question was kind of tricky. Okay? Germany did not exist. Were there Germanic nations at this time? Absolutely. Now, before we go further, I need to explain that, because here in the United States we have a tendency to use our own definitions before we consider other nation or other cultures' definitions. So let's do a little word play here. Okay, so we have state and we have a nation. What in the United States is a state?
A territory?
What is a state? Really isn't a territory. What is it?
It's like a nation.
State is like a nation in the United States.
They're all kind of like together.
An organized.
Cluster of people.
State is what? What is a state?
It's a branch of the nation.
Okay, it's a smaller component of a nation, right? Sound good? Okay, smaller component, smaller part of a nation. Okay? And so what is a nation? Out of many, one, right? Okay? Many states acting together. Correct? Okay. The problem is, you go over to Europe and use these definitions, they're going to look at you like you're an idiot. Okay? They're saying, where did you get your college degree? Because this is not what they use. These are not their definitions. A state is a political entity. With borders. Okay? So what is a nation? A nation is a group of people with similar cultures. Now, why the heck am I talking about this stuff? Because even though Germany did not exist in 1870, or as I asked in the original question, in 1776, the Germanic people existed. The Germanic tribes existed. Okay? The Germanic nation has existed for a very long time. It is a group of people with a similar culture. Okay? It is not until recently that the Germanic state has come into existence. The Germanic state has come into existence. Now, you hear talk all the time about the Jewish nation. What is the Jewish nation? It is a group of people who believe in Judaism. When you hear that Israel is a Jewish state, what is the difference? There is a majority of people in Israel who are Jewish, but are there Jewish people in the United States as well? Absolutely. Are they part of the Jewish nation? Absolutely. Okay. Nations in Europe transcend boundaries. I've always thought it was funny that I am of German heritage, but tracing my family back, when we immigrated into the United States, we came from St. Petersburg. Where is St. Petersburg? Russia. We are Germans from Russia. Okay? So, now that we have that under our belt, we got that. The Franco-Prussian War erupts in 1870. It is defeated by the Germanic Alliance in 1871. As a result, France is forced to pay $5 million in French francs in gold. This is important for what we're getting ready to enter into. I'm not going to talk about it today. We'll talk about it next time. Now, because, or actually let me rephrase this. The man responsible for pulling together the network of German principalities, German different nations, pulling them, German states, pulling them all into one to defeat the French, realizes that it's easier to be coordinated and all under one structure, one alliance, or one system than it is to be separate, right? Yes? Okay, Bruce Lee's fighting people, right? And if they all attacked him all at once, what would happen? He would not be able to defeat them. That's why whenever Bruce Lee fought somebody, he'd hit one person would rush at a time. We all know that if everybody rushed Bruce Lee at one time, he would be defeated. I mean, come on. He's not Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris, on the other hand, no problem because he's got that fist hiding in his beard, So he can defeat people that way. So, Otto von Bismarck is the Chancellor of Prussia. He is the one that put this alliance together. He then converts this alliance into the creation of the German state. Okay? So create Germany. Why is that important? What are we going to be dealing with from now until the end of this semester? That is going to be one of the biggest bones of contention in the 20th century that the United States has to deal with. Germany. Okay? Am I saying Germans are bad? No, because with a name like Frankie, you can't get away with that. All right? Now, because of all this influx of gold that has come in, Germany is going to stop printing silver coins. Their silver coins were known as thaler, and they had thaler coins. And they're going to stop printing them because silver is no longer as useful or as valuable now that there's so much gold on the market. They almost become worth less. So what happens is they take the silver off the market and they start printing gold coins instead. Now, what the heck does this have to do with federal government? What does this have to do with United States history? Well, they just stopped printing silver coins. They're going to make them in gold. Where are they getting the silver coins from? The silver to make these coins in 1871. They're going down to the gold and silver store and buying it. You're fishing for it? What?
Europe?
Nope.
Alaska?
Not quite in Alaska yet, but you're close.
California?
You're not getting in California. That stuff's pretty much panned out. You're getting it from the United States, and you're getting it from the considered Midwest, this whole area. The silver, the gold rushes are occurring right now. We'll talk about them when we come back. But them stopping to buy it, is going to put a stop on the purchase of silver. And the problem is that the production is still going to occur. Because the production is still occurring and the silver is not being purchased abroad, silver is going to become worth less. Not worthless yet, but worth less. But space. End result is this is going to send our economy into the first depression we've had since the Civil War. We'll touch on that when we come back on Thursday.